Welcome back to Stamps Old World UK, the channel where we dive deep into the fascinating universe of rare stamps, their history, and most importantly, their market value in today's world. In this episode, we are going to explore one of the most iconic American revenue stamps, the $10 documentary stamp. This stamp is not just a piece of paper with ink, but rather a small work of art, a piece of history, and a symbol of how governments once raised money through the taxation of legal and financial documents. Collectors across the globe know that documentary revenue stamps carry a special charm, and the $10 denomination is a perfect example of this. Today, we will analyze its origin, its unique design, the role it played in history, and what kind of value it holds in the stamp market today. The $10 documentary stamp that we are focusing on was issued by the United States Internal Revenue Service during a time when high-value documentary stamps were required for validating large financial transactions. These could include things like stock transfers, property deeds, corporate mergers, or other transactions where significant sums of money were at stake. Imagine a world without electronic transfers or digital banking systems. Back then, when you made a huge financial move, you needed to physically attach a stamp like this to make it legal. That is why this particular $10 stamp existed, and it explains why higher denomination stamps were issued in the first place. Now, let us take a moment to talk about its design. The $10 orange documentary stamp features a classical profile of a female figure, often associated with allegorical representations of liberty or justice. It is surrounded by an ornate frame with the words United States Internal Revenue written around the portrait and the denomination boldly shown at the bottom as $10. The vibrant orange ink gives the stamp a striking appearance, making it stand out in any collection. The engraving and detail show the kind of craftsmanship that was common in early 20th century stamps, with intricate lines, borders, and an overall design that reflected dignity and authority. Collectors are particularly drawn to high-denomination stamps like this because they were used less often. Lower-value stamps, such as 5 cents, 10 cents, or 50 cents, were widely issued and seen everywhere, but a $10 stamp in its time was a serious amount of money. In fact, to put it into perspective, $10 during the late 19th and early 20th century had the purchasing power equivalent to several $100s today. That means these stamps were not just bought casually. They were used for big transactions, which automatically makes them rarer to find in good condition. Many were canceled heavily with pen marks or ink, and very few survived in pristine mint condition. So now the question every collector wants to know. What is the value of this $10 orange documentary stamp? In today's market, the answer depends on several factors, including condition, whether it is mint or used, whether it has any faults such as tears, thins, or heavy cancels, and also the demand among collectors. In today's philatelic market, a well-preserved mint-condition example of this $10 stamp can fetch anywhere from $100 to several hundred US. On the higher end, a superb specimen with perfect centering, bright color, and never-hinged gum can even reach over $1,000 in specialized auctions. On the other hand, a heavily canceled or damaged copy may only be worth $10 to $20, sometimes less, depending on the buyer. Condition is king in the stamp world, and this stamp is no exception. Auction houses and online marketplaces like eBay, Hipstamp, and professional stamp dealers continue to see steady interest in these high-denomination revenue stamps. While they may not always attract the same explosive prices as rare postage stamps like the inverted Jenny, they are highly respected in specialized circles. Revenue stamp collectors are a passionate group, and they know the historical and artistic value these stamps represent. The $10 documentary is seen as a key piece, especially for anyone building a collection of United States revenues. An important point to mention is that stamp values can fluctuate over time. Economic conditions, collector demand, and even generational interest play a role in determining prices. Some collectors buy stamps as investments, hoping that their rarity and condition will make them appreciate in value. Others simply collect for the love of history, beauty, and the stories behind these little masterpieces. Either way, the $10 documentary stamp remains a desirable addition for anyone who wants to own a tangible connection to America's financial history. Now, let's imagine for a moment the story behind one of these stamps. Picture a businessman in the early 1900s completing a massive financial deal worth thousands of dollars. He would have walked into an office, documents in hand, and to make them legally binding, an official clerk would have affixed one of these orange stamps right onto the paperwork. The stamp would then be canceled with an ink pen or hand stamp, signifying that the tax had been paid to the government. That very stamp may have survived, torn from the original documents, and now rests in the hands of a collector over 100 years later. It's like holding a piece of financial history in your palm, connecting the past to the present. For collectors watching this video, the advice is simple. If you come across a $10 documentary stamp, take the time to examine it carefully. Check for faults, check the gum if it is unused, and always look at the centering and color. Those details will make a huge difference in the market value. For beginners, do not worry if your stamp isn't in perfect shape. Even a used example carries historical value and can be an excellent starting point. Over time, you can upgrade your collection to better and rarer specimens.
Next up, the fascinating world of collectible stamps, rare banknotes, and historical treasures from around the globe. In today's episode, we are going to shift our focus slightly from stamps to another area of numismatics that excites collectors worldwide: old American banknotes. Specifically, we will be talking about the historic $10 bill that you see here, a striking piece of American paper money that combines beauty, rarity, and strong collector value in today's market. This is not just a note that once passed from hand to hand in everyday commerce. It is a symbol of American history, artistry, and financial development. And today, it stands as a sought-after collectible in the world of currency collecting. The $10 bill you see here features a portrait of Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, a founding father, and the man who laid the foundation of America's financial system. Hamilton's legacy in shaping the U.S. economy makes him a fitting choice for the $10 note. On the back of this bill, you can see an engraving of the United States Treasury Building, the very institution that controlled the financial lifeblood of the country. This powerful combination of imagery, Hamilton on the front and the Treasury on the back, was meant to inspire trust, stability, and respect for America's financial system. One of the most fascinating things about this $10 note is the design and printing quality. These older notes were printed with detailed engraving and high-quality paper that made them far more artistic than the simple designs of modern banknotes. Collectors admire the intricate border patterns, the beautiful script, and the bold, historic fonts that make these notes instantly recognizable as early to mid-20th century issues. The greenback design is equally impressive, with its depiction of the Treasury building surrounded by ornate frames and decorative scrollwork. Holding one of these notes in your hand feels like stepping back in time to an era when paper money was as much about artistry as it was about function. Now let us move on to the historical context. This $10 note was issued as part of the series of U.S. silver certificates and Federal Reserve notes that circulated widely during the early and mid-1900s. In those days, some $10 bills were backed directly by silver or gold reserves, making them more than just a promise of value. They were exchangeable for real precious metals. This gave them a special significance that today's purely fiat currency does not have. People trusted these notes because they represented tangible wealth stored in the vaults of the Treasury. Over time, however, the United States moved away from the silver and gold standard, and these older notes became obsolete in circulation. But for collectors, that obsolescence has turned them into valuable artifacts of American monetary history. The question that excites every collector, of course, is how much are these notes worth in today's market? The value depends on several key factors: the series year, the condition of the note, the rarity of its serial number, and whether it is a common circulation piece or a scarce variety. For example, a $10 bill in average circulated condition might sell for anywhere between $20 and $50 US, which is already 2 to 5 times its face value. A note in very fine or extra fine condition, with crisp paper and only minimal signs of wear, can command prices from $100 to several $100s. If you are lucky enough to own an uncirculated specimen with perfect paper quality, sharp corners, and no folds, the price can easily rise into the high hundreds or even over $1,000, depending on the rarity of the issue. Another factor that can make a huge difference is the serial number. Collectors prize notes with low serial numbers, repeating patterns, or so-called fancy numbers, such as 000001, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or radar numbers like 455, 5554. Such notes can multiply the value many times over. Imagine holding a $10 bill with a serial number that collectors would fight over in an auction. That is the kind of hidden gem that sometimes lies within old collections or forgotten drawers. Auction houses, currency dealers, and online platforms such as eBay and heritage auctions regularly see strong interest in these $10 notes. The demand is steady, and the market has remained healthy because of the note's beauty, historical value, and relatively affordable entry point compared to ultra-rare banknotes like the $1,000 bills or early colonial currency. In fact, many collectors recommend starting with the $10 denomination because it's still accessible for beginners, but has enough rarity to grow in value over time. When we compare stamps and banknotes, one thing becomes very clear. Both tell stories of history, economics, and culture. The $10 documentary stamp we discussed earlier told the story of taxes, legal documents, and financial regulation in America's past. This $10 banknote tells the story of commerce, banking, and the role of the Treasury in shaping the financial destiny of a nation. Together, stamps and notes give us a window into history that few other collectibles can match. Collectors of both categories often overlap because the same passion for history, design, and rarity drives interest in both stamps and old money. So what should collectors do if they come across one of these notes? The first rule is to handle it carefully. Banknotes are fragile, and condition is everything. Keep them flat, away from light, and preferably in a protective currency sleeve. The second rule is to get them properly identified by series, date, and type, because certain years and varieties are worth far more than others. And finally, always research recent sales in the market before making a decision to sell or buy. Knowledge is the most valuable currency in the collector's world. To conclude, the old $10 bill featuring Alexander Hamilton is not just a piece of currency. It is a work of art, a piece of American financial history, and a collectible that continues to hold strong value in today's market. Whether worth $20 or over $1,000, its true worth lies in the history it represents and the stories it carries. As collectors, we are not just holding pieces of paper. We are preserving fragments of history that future generations will look back on with awe. And here on Stamps Old World UK, we will continue to celebrate these timeless treasures, one stamp and one note at a time.
Next up, they are all $10 denominations. We will dive into two very different $10 United States documentary stamps and a $10 United States banknote featuring Alexander Hamilton. Together, they create a story about how governments raised money, how banks built trust, and how art was embedded in even the smallest details of our financial lives. By the end of this video, you will not only know the history behind these treasures, but also the current market values that make them desirable for collectors today. Let's begin with the first of our stamps, the beautiful $10 orange documentary revenue issue. This stamp was created by the United States Internal Revenue Service during a period when documentary stamps were essential for legal and financial transactions. These stamps were not postage stamps, but rather tax stamps that had to be attached to documents such as deeds, stock transfers, and contracts to make them legally binding. The $10 value was a very large amount for its time, and this alone made the stamp rare. Its design features a classical profile portrait surrounded by an ornate oval frame, and its striking orange color makes it stand out in any collection. Today, this stamp remains one of the most visually attractive revenue issues and continues to draw strong interest from collectors worldwide. In terms of value, a used example might range anywhere from $20 to $50, depending on condition, while a mint, well-preserved stamp can fetch hundreds of dollars. Truly superb examples, with bright color, great centering, and never hinged gum, have even reached values over $1,000 in auctions. Next, we move to the second item, which takes us from stamps to the world of banknotes. The $10 United States banknote featuring Alexander Hamilton is one of the most iconic pieces of American currency. Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, was the architect of America's financial system, and his presence on the note was meant to symbolize stability and trust in the economy. The reverse of the note features an engraving of the U.S. Treasury building, tying the design directly to the nation's financial heart. This note was part of a series issued in the early to mid-20th century, and at the time, many notes were backed by gold or silver reserves, making them far more meaningful than today's fiat money. Collectors admire not only the historical connection, but also the fine engraving and artistic style of the note. Market values vary widely. A heavily circulated example might bring around $20 to $50, while crisp, uncirculated examples with no folds, sharp corners, and clean paper can command several $100s. Rare serial numbers or unique varieties can drive the value even higher, sometimes into the thousands. For collectors, this note is both a gateway into paper money collecting and a centerpiece of any U.S. currency collection. Now let us turn our attention to the third piece, another $10 U.S. Internal Revenue documentary stamp, this time in a deep green color with a striking allegorical figure at its center. This design is quite different from the orange issue we saw earlier. Instead of a portrait bust, it shows a full-length figure of a robed woman holding symbolic objects representing law, justice, or liberty. The engraving is detailed, with bold lettering across the top and sides reading United States Internal Revenue and Documentary. Its appearance is stately, almost regal, reminding us that these were not just decorative stamps, but official instruments of taxation. Like the orange issue, the $10 denomination made it a high-value stamp, one that was rarely used in everyday transactions. Today, its market value depends heavily on condition. Used copies might be worth between $20 and $70, but mint examples are far rarer and can reach hundreds of dollars in today's collector market. High-grade, unused copies with perfect perforations and fresh color can be worth significantly more depending on the demand at auction. When we step back and look at these three pieces together, we see a story that goes beyond collectibles. The two documentary stamps show how governments once raised money by taxing legal and commercial documents. Each high-value stamp is a reminder of massive financial transactions, corporate mergers, or land sales in which these stamps were affixed to validate the deals. The $10 banknote, meanwhile, represents the circulating money that ordinary people and businesses relied upon daily, backed by the financial system Alexander Hamilton designed. Together, these items form a snapshot of America's financial history, where taxation, commerce, and currency all came together in tangible form. Collectors today know that condition and rarity are everything. A common stamp or note in poor shape might only bring a modest price, but that same item in pristine condition can be a showpiece worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That is the beauty of collecting. Each item has its own story, its own journey through history, and its own unique value in today's market. Whether you collect for the history, the art, or the potential investment, these $10 issues stand as a reminder of how much significance can be carried in something as small as a stamp or as simple as a piece of paper money. In conclusion, the $10 orange documentary stamp, the $10 green allegorical documentary stamp, and the $10 Alexander Hamilton banknote are not just financial instruments of the past. They are treasures of history, each carrying with it a legacy of art, law, finance, and power. Their market values today range from tens of dollars to thousands depending on condition, rarity, and demand, but their true worth is in the stories they tell.
For collectors around the world, owning one of these pieces is like owning a fragment of history that connects us directly to the past. Thank you for joining me today on Stamps Old World UK. If you enjoyed this journey through the world of stamps and banknotes, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more deep dives into the collectibles that shaped our world. Remember, every stamp has a story, every banknote carries history, and here on this channel, every story is worth telling.